and technology. So let's try and keep as close to time as possible this afternoon. Our next session is same subject, different speaker. We've got Alan Smith for our next presentation. Alan will be well known to many of you as SDC and CISO's investigation guru, as we call him. He's architect in chief of the COMET incident management and root cause analysis system. His past life is very interesting. We get a story every day. Alan was a detective, senior detective here in Aberdeen, and as a major head of major crime operations, he's had his fair share of investigating murder and mayhem over the years. However, he's held a unique role as the lead investigator for fatalities and major incidents in the North Sea and oil and gas sector. And following his career in law enforcement, Alan immersed himself in the world of industrial incident investigation, and he became a specialist in root cause analysis. So Alan's passionate, as those who know him, in working with organizations to help learn lessons from incidents. However, there's an untapped opportunity for organizations to improve and reduce risks before incidents occur. So this is a common theme emerging from today as well. It's what you do beforehand. So Alan's presentation here will unveil COMET's new kind of exciting evolution on the world of proactive root cause analysis. So Alan, I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Doug. That's great. Can you see the screen there?
Yes, we've got you there.
Good. That's the first hurdle overcome, which is always good. Your introduction, Doug, thanks, reminded me I spoke at a conference in Houston 2 or 3 years ago, and the chap who was performing the role that you're doing today, Doug, he introduced me as Alan Smith from Scotland in the UK, who specialises in homicide, and it created a reaction in the front row, I have to say, but it was funny because we talk about detail, and that was just the omission of one little word, the investigation of homicide, and it kind of changed the context and the mood in the hall, which was good. So interesting that we talk about what differences little things can make. And your introduction, Doug, touched on the fact that I've had a kind of, I suppose, career investigation background, both in the world of criminality and more lately over the past decade working in industrial settings. And people often ask me, are there similarities between investigating serious criminal activity and investigating serious industry accidents? And there's one clear and significant difference, and the difference can be kind of summed up in one word, and that's intent. In the world of criminality, particularly kind of serious and organized crime, the perpetrator or the organized crime group, they are wholly intent on breaking the laws of society for their own criminal gains. Whereas in the world of industry investigation, it's the very opposite. That intent, perversely, the intent is often positive. They want to get the task completed. They want to get the job done. And perhaps in the performance of that and the desire to get that done and the push on, incidents occur. But I've never yet encountered an incident where there was malice or intent for that to happen. I also get asked, because root cause analysis is a big part of what we do, and COMET is built around root cause analysis. And some of the previous inputs, the last one in particular from Mark and Nathan, touched on COMET. And I often get asked, could you use a system, a root cause analysis system like COMET in the world of investigating criminal activity perversely? Could you use it for that? And again, largely the answer is no, because in the world of criminal investigations, the real driver for the investigator is to get to the heart of what happened, who was responsible. The kind of reasons behind it, the why, are largely less important. Not always the case if you're looking at socioeconomic reasons around gun crime and trafficking. You want to understand what's driving that. But largely, you don't delve too much into the why. Whereas within the world of industry investigations, that is the absolutely key thing. You need to get to the heart of what drove behaviours, often poor behaviours, what caused systems to fail that were built to succeed. So getting in behind that and getting to the root cause is absolutely critical. And so my input today, there's only 8 slides. I'm going to kind of talk through them. Lord knows where I'll end up taking you, but I'll try and keep it on theme. But largely what I want to do is delve into the world of investigation beyond the obvious. And by that I mean areas that organizations have to generate performance that I think often get neglected, or they certainly don't get the attention disproportionately that for example reactive incidents gets, and that's a real shame. It's a missed opportunity. And so thinking about that, it was interesting. I was listening to James Pomeroy. As I always listen intently to James Pomeroy because he's always got something interesting to say, and he kind of touched on his earlier presentation around perhaps a mild challenge towards the kind of safety currency of traditional assurance activity in an organization. You know, the paper-based auditing and that traditional behaviors or assurance that exists. And James is innovative. And I suppose the challenge he was making was, can we get beyond that? Because there's a whole world of opportunity that exists, and I do agree with him, but I also believe, and Burju, you touched on this earlier in your question, there are still situations where we have to apply a degree of rigor. We have to apply that rigor around safe systems of work, albeit as I think in the new safety we're moving towards a world of more inclusive kind of working with those that are on the tools because they understand the risk. And it was interesting. I had just 2 days ago, I was on an investigation with a client where they had a pretty high potential incident. And interestingly, surprise, the angst from the organization was, you know, we've got all these procedures and the guys know about them, but they don't follow them. And you know, I hear this every investigation I'm on, and the question is, right? Well, we'll have to be stricter about auditing, and we'll have to be stricter, and all of these things are good, but the reality is, it's still us and them. The workers, when you interview them, it's very much they're dictated to, and I think as we move forward in this kind of new safety philosophy, the inclusiveness of the workers to get them bought in. And get them perhaps even involved, dare I say, in writing procedures to an extent, because they understand better than anybody the risk. I think we'll be in a good place, but that's another topic for another day. We all know what triggers typical investigations. You know, there's no surprise there, and the types of incidents that you're gonna involve yourself in are there to read. I'm not going to go through them, but they're standard incidents, and we've all had them, but they're far from the full picture. Now, what do I mean by that? When we deploy to investigate an incident, it's almost certainly when something has gone wrong, something has failed, somebody's been injured, and the investigation of that is clearly important. Nobody's going to say that we don't want to investigate these failures. But the irony is that task or activity that led to the incident that went wrong has probably been conducted hundreds of times successfully in the past. But we tend not to look at that. We tend to focus disproportionately on when what actually went wrong on the day. So we're only getting a kind of one-dimensional aspect of the investigation. But in between that, tasks being performed successfully and tasks failing completely, you've got another area, and this is the area that businesses focus on in terms of their assurance activity. It's trying to pick up on these kind of non-conformances through auditing or inspection. That I kind of like to refer to them as they're like latent factors. They're like dormant root causes. They're incidents without consequence. almost like incidents in the post is a good way of putting them. They're coming to you, and they're going to land on your doorstep unless you intercept them. And that's what audits are seeking to do. They're seeking to identify and intercept that issue before it turns into an incident. And that's a kind of holy grail of safety, if you like, and that's what we're wanting to pursue today. And so the kind of theme of my input is very much bound around how do we help organizations who perform audits actually create good action out of audits, because you know the lack of action is the key thing. Organizations become fixated with KPIs around audits and assurance. Have we conducted them on time, as many as we ought to have? And what sometimes unfortunately gets lost is the value that comes out of these audits, and that is the driver behind this iteration of COMET that we are moving into, that I'm showing you today, COMET Assured. It's all about maximizing value from your audits. And I don't know how many investigations I've been involved in with really tragic outcomes, but you know, there's always two little words that I hear time and time again. If only we'd picked up on the issues earlier. You know, if we'd only tuned into the precursors, the signals, the red flags. That's a big one. If only we'd acted on our assurance findings, you know. And that's a key thing. It's one thing identifying a non-conformance, but what are you going to do about it beyond perhaps a quick localized fix? How do you build that sustainable organizational fix that's going to actually make an organizational or a systemic difference? That's the key thing. And I've got a prompt in there for myself, because if I didn't, I'd forget, which is probably why it's called a prompt. But anyway, it's about an incident that I was involved in investigating down in the Gulf of Mexico 4 or 5 years ago, and it's always stuck in my mind. And I don't want to give too many anecdotes about emotive incidents. That's not what I'm here to do. But sometimes a little personal example kind of drives home the message. And this incident was a real tragedy. It was a fatality that occurred on an FPSO, a floating production storage offloading vessel in the Gulf of Mexico. And on the night shift, there was a crew of guys moving some heavy equipment. And in the process of moving the heavy equipment, there was movement on the vessel. They lost balance, and one of the work party was crushed by this piece of equipment. Now, emergency response kicked in. The helicopter was summoned to the vessel to medevac the casualty, who was still thankfully alive at that point in time. But when the helicopter landed, the doctor that was with the helicopter, because that was part of the ER response, he went to obtain a piece of kit that was essential to help this guy survive the injuries and apply medical aid. And unfortunately, that piece of kit wasn't to be found. It wasn't part of the inventory. It ought to have been there, but it wasn't. And during the investigation, the point is, you know, that injuries were survivable, but unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries. And that was a real tragedy here. And when we conducted the investigation, you always look backwards in an investigation. And historically, we found that about 6 or 7 weeks previously, there had been an audit of this whole process of ER and the helicopter and the inventory and the equipment. And they'd identified that this key piece of kit was missing. And it had been actioned in the audit, had been recorded to be replaced, but it never did. It never did. And it always occurred to me, and still does, you know, imagine if you were the manager responsible with the duty of care to speak to that guy's family, because the organization let him down big time. And again, that's an audit. The audit had been performed, but unfortunately the action that came out of the audit was wholly ineffective. Imagine if you could replace these two little words, if only, with thank goodness, and turn that whole thing on its head. Yeah? How good would that be? That really would be the holy grail of safety, if you like, if you could be confident that your assurance activity was actually delivering on the intent of that activity and that you were actually acting on what happened. That would be a game changer, wouldn't it? Does that sound familiar? Perhaps not so much, but it could be mission possible if you think about it. And I want to explore that with you. You know, the whole area of incident prevention, prediction, and Mark and Nathan spoke about this in far more detail in the previous presentation. It can be kind of controversial. You know, the minute you get into speaking about, well, can you predict an incident? Can you forecast when an event's going to happen? Can we detect the undetected? It gets a little bit dodgy, if I like, you know, because clearly the answer is no. I can't tell you that on the 12th of October at 12:30 you're going to have an incident on your plant. That would be ridiculous. I wrote a blog recently around, and I used a kind of extreme weather analogy where I was saying you know, you can't predict exactly when and where a hurricane is perhaps going to hit a particular country, but you can predict that that area is prone to that particular activity, and you could perhaps prepare for it. And as the event gets closer, often things become clearer. And it's a little bit like that in the world of safety. If you are tuned in to what's going on in the background around your latent issues, that's the key thing. In every investigation I've been involved in, your intent is obviously to get to the causation of the incident. That's obvious. But in an investigation, you will always uncover what we call latent factors. These issues, the failures that had no direct correlation with the incident in play, but they're an issue the organisation wants to deal with. These are gold dust, absolute gold dust. You could argue that they're more important than the actual causation for the incident, because that's happened. But you've got an opportunity when you identify these issues to do something positive and turn around the business's safety threat, if you like. And so that whole audit assurance piece is hugely, the value that exists within that is fantastic. So if you can tune into that, then you're going to be in a far stronger place. But you know what? It's one of these things that everybody knows. Nothing I'm telling you just now would surprise you. You'll be doing auditing activity every day of the week in your organisation and probably doing it very well. But I would challenge you to ask the question, are you actually achieving the intent of the audits in terms of performance improvement or safety improvement? That's the whole point of the exercise. There's also a challenge, of course, around the disproportionate amount of activity. We put a huge amount of time, resource, and effort into assurance and auditing and inspection. So if we are going to actually act on that, we need to be confident that the effort, the energy we're putting into that is in the right direction. And there was somebody on one of the previous, I think it might have been Nathan, spoke about SIF, serious injury and fatality potential. If you can use this methodology that I'm talking about within the likes of COMET Assured to get to the incidents potential that are really worth chasing down, then that way you can be confident about the effort, because you can't fix every problem that you've got in the organisation. That would be wholly illogical and disproportionate. So some of the pitfalls, and again, you'll recognise them, you can read through them. You know, measuring audit success. Is that what audits are in terms of KPIs? Making sure that you've conducted them where you should, as often as you ought to, on time. Do they end up with the fixing of only localised, easy solutions, but nothing sustainable or systemic? All of these issues. Do you find yourself clustering on topics and themes that become the flavour of the month in terms of campaigns? So we'll look at dropped objects this month, and then we'll go on and we'll look at something else. And I'm not being, I'm not being disrespectful in any way of that, but the key thing with any safety activity, because it's limited and you've only got so much effort that you can place, how do we make sure that we're pointing the dial in the right direction? That's the key thing to it. We're obsessed, you know, as humans, we're obsessed with measuring things. You know, I read recently, probably because of the fuel crisis, that the most common calculation that humans make on a day-to-day basis is how much fuel they've got in their tank at any given time to get the journey done. That's maybe the case or maybe not. But in the world of safety, I know that the most common calculation or metric that I hear of is numbers of injuries, seriousness of injuries, number of incidents. These are all the kind of metrics that you're chasing. These are all these lagging indicators that we want to get away from. We want to get into the kind of leading indicators. That's a challenge. That's what you want to get after, is the leading indicators before they become lagging issues, you know. And when you look at these safety numbers, you know, why are you doing that? You're looking at them to ask the question, are we as an organization safe? Now, depending on how you apply the numbers, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe it's no, or maybe it's about luck, you know, luck in the day. Because Mark mentioned earlier in the kind of home truths of root causes, that root causes, you know, they don't respect a hierarchy of consequences. I don't know how many investigations I've been involved in. Well, 2 days ago, I was involved in that investigation where I can tell you that if this individual had been 1 or 2 feet to the right-hand side, he'd be dead. Simple as that. The root causes of that incident that led to the unplanned pressure release have nothing to do with the consequence. That happened, but often the consequence largely has got to do with luck in the day. But you don't want to rely on that, obviously. So let's just kind of wind up my sermon on the mount here, if you like. COMET Assured. This was the design intent of COMET Assured. We've got a good system, good process that works very well, proven track record in getting to root cause of reactive incidents. But we want to get it into the world of proactive incidents where it can really, really make a difference. And this was again collaborative work that we do with organizations who help us. So we set up a steering group again with some of our COMET clients. Many of you on the call or in the meeting today will have been involved in that, and for that I'm eternally grateful. We haven't got the knowledge to do this. We need to work collaboratively with our COMET community, and that's what we did. And what we were seeking to do was, you know, how do we diagnose that compliance gaps before they result in harm? Remember the incident in the post. How do you intercept that and deal with the causes, not just the symptoms, the why, not the what, all of these things, and get truly into that proactive space. That's the challenge for you. COMET Assured is the most latest member, if you like, of the COMET ecosystem, and it does allow you to apply root cause analysis logic to your findings. Now, what do I mean by that? The root causes that lead to a non-conformance are the very same root causes that lead to incidents. So logically, whilst you also want to understand the root causes for incidents, if you could get after the root causes for your proactive issues in the audits assurance world, marry them up and somehow filter them through and deal with them, eliminate them, I don't need to tell you how powerful that would be for you as an organization. Does it happen? Well, not in the experience we have. We work with lots of clients, and quite often the outputs of their audits assurance is in an entirely different database to their incidents and in a different format. You wouldn't know the two coexist. And unless you have them in the same place and are able to measure them through that same lens, you've got no chance of being able to pull them apart. So that's the intent of COMET Assured. Last slide, just a kind of sneak preview. I'm not going to take you onto the software because trust me, I'd be the world's worst taking anybody onto software. What COMET Assures allows you to do is to kind of build a schedule, bespoke templates to your standards. So you can design from within the system at the very outset the templates, the standards that you want to apply to all manner of your assurance activity. That can be ones you build yourself, or it can be existing ones, or it can be ones that are recognized across the industry. You can deliver the audits in real time using mobile devices. So your auditors on scene will be linking up and shaking hands with the software that's actually going to give you the outputs. So you're not double handling the data, and it's very much a joined up activity. And also linked in, of course, to your incident data. So it's all in the same place, and it's all beginning to talk to each other, which is really exciting. It can, of course, interface APIs-wise with your existing platform if that's a slightly different. If your auditing tool is different to this, then we need to make sure that they can talk to each other. But you, importantly, you can set the business rules to select findings that you want to investigate further. So the system is totally configurable in terms of what you want to use it for in the world of assurance. But the key thing that isn't that won't be manipulated is the use of the taxonomy to make sure that you're getting the outputs that you want and can make sense of. That's the key to this whole thing. So again, all I would say to you is we're hugely excited about this product. It's new to the market. We know that it's groundbreaking. We would love to give you a show and tell and a deeper dive into the system, and would welcome you to do that. Okay, Doug.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, some strong and clear messages there, definitely, about mindset. Good. Anyone want to pick up on anything in that, first of all? Agree? Disagree? If any of you have been involved in some of the development of this, can sort of share experience, or any of you who are auditors who how do you see this coming into that assurance world? I'll hand over the microphone for a moment if anyone wants to pick up.
Stunned into silence.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah, Mark, on you go. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, hi there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Alan, and we spoke the other day, referenced this. This is definitely somewhere where our business would want to take this. We certainly are trying to look more at the proactive side of audits and investigations to make sure that we are learning, because at the moment we're just repeating ourselves of our root causes and we're not learning from them.
Yeah,
so,
and I hadn't seen you come into the call, Mark, into the meeting. It's good to see you there, and you're absolutely right. The work that you're doing on the project at Euston is right in this sweet spot. You're at the beginning of your journey on a project that's going to last years, and you can get after this stuff early on. You're not going to have to go back in time too far. And I know your passion personally around making the use of COMET proactive, and your contribution to this has been first class. So thanks for that.
No worries, thanks.
Okay. Yep. On you go.
Hi everybody. I just want to make a comment and maybe a question. I think the comment about stop counting and begin analyzing is very impactful. I think many organizations truly stagnate at that stage. So I think the important part is to continue push on the analysis piece, right? They're both instrumental, but analysis is eventually what leads to action. So can you elaborate a little more on how to continue to push that analysis piece, especially in the events that are less severe, like the project you and I are working on, first aids and near misses, that it's the bulk of all data, right?
Yeah, thanks, Guillermo. I think one of the challenges, one of the risks of this philosophy we have is how do you apply it within the resource that you've got at a proportionate level, because if you could very quickly become paralyzed or overwhelmed with this stuff. So you need to be confident, as I said in the presentation, that you're applying your effort in the correct areas. Now I know that you've got a primary issue just now with the kind of low-level incidents. But again, I would take you back to one of these, you know, you've heard me speaking about this forever, Guillermo, about root causes don't come with a hierarchy of seriousness. You know, that incident that you're investigating, the first aid incident that led to the cut finger, you know, that same root cause next week could manifest itself as a life-changing injury. I've seen it time and time again. But sometimes organizations get this kind of mental block there, and they can't get that. So it's being able, what I would say to you is, organizations need to be able to weed out the incidents that have got the potential to cause serious injury and fatality, and put to the side, more or less, and be confident enough to put to the side the voluminous incidents that don't fall into that category. You know, if the worst that ever is going to happen is you're going to trip and bruise your knee, let's not lose sleep over that. But if you've got an incident that was low level, but my goodness, on any other given day could have lost somebody's limb, then you want to get after that, you know. So the classification and the confidence around separating the wheat from the chaff in terms of potential is manna from heaven here.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Guillermo. Good to see you as well. All right, I think we should probably try and stick to time because we're bang on time at the moment. So thanks again, Alan, for your contributions. Interesting as always. And we'll move on to our next speaker. Again, following on in the theme of technology and innovation in this world. And again, with an element of artificial intelligence. I actually did a PhD in artificial intelligence 30 years ago, and it's great now to see some things really coming to fruition in terms of this technology, that it's becoming an everyday tool now within products and within various digital services in order to deliver value.